Hi folks, I'm Chuck Black. We're doing 52 weeks of Python in 10-minute sessions, and the topic for today is comparisons. What are comparisons? Comparisons are where you compare one value to another and take some action. Here's an if statement that has that. Here's an if statement within two nested for loops that we're going to do. We're going to look at standard versions, and again, a not equals to in that situation. Here's a situation where we are going to be talking about assignment versus copy versus deep copy, so I will touch on that. Once I'm done with that, we're going to look at using a simple comparison using less than and greater than, so pretty straightforward. Lastly, there's some class stuff that I don't even talk about except to mention you need to define this underscore EQ or whatever, greater than, less than, if you want to do comparison of objects that are derived from classes. That's it. Let's get started. Okay, so let's talk about comparisons. Now, comparisons are pretty easy. It's doing something like this. Notice we use two equal signs to compare values. You can use equal, equal. You can use minus equal, which would mean not equal. You can use greater than, less than, etc. In the code here, all I do is I create a bunch of devices and then I print them out. That is what you see right here, the listing of all of these devices. What I'm going to do next in this situation is I'm printing them out if they're not equal to Cisco. As you can see here, I'm printing them out as if they're equal to Cisco. That's because, remember, I just changed that a second ago. If I was to run this again and look at the results, then what we would see is that we are printing out, here's the original list of devices, and if we go down here, this is where we're printing out devices that are not equal to Cisco, and as you can see, everything is Juniper or Arista. So what I'm going to do next is a little bit clever. It's this code right here where I'm looking for duplicate names. How do I end up with duplicate names? Well, I should have mentioned this before, but the way I created my list of devices was by calling my function create devices, which is in create utils, and I do number of subnets, number of devices, etc. You're familiar with that because you understand about functions and modules now. So in my code, what I'm actually going to go through here and figure out if there are any duplicates. Now here you can see, you probably can't see, but as it turns out, the last time I ran this, here's my output from it, and I found duplicates. In fact, I found a number of duplicates for R3LE, and then I found a duplicate for R3UD. So basically what I did, and the way that I did this, was I started by going through all of these devices. So I'm going through devices. This is a normal going through the list, but I've used enumerate. What enumerate is going to do is it's going to give me two variables. One is the index and one is the actual device, and I'm calling it device A because I want to do comparison. So I have a for loop here, and next what I do is inside my for loop, I'm going to do another for loop to look for duplicates, but I'm going to actually start not at the top of devices, but I'm going to start at one beyond the index where I am. This is what is called slicing. You can look at some of the long form version of this if you want more of an explanation, but basically I'm saying start at index plus 1. So if I'm at the very beginning and this is 0, then I will start at 1. If this is number 24, let's say, then it will start at 25. Remember, I have 50 with the ones. I have 2 subnets and 25 devices. Anyway, I'm only going to go through the subsequent ones, and then I'm going to do a simple comparison. If they're equal, I'm going to print out found a match, and that is what you see right here. Now, one thing that's interesting, because I'm generating these randomly, every time I do this, I'm going to end up with different found matches, okay? I've seen it where there were no matches. This is different than last time. This is all a side effect of the fact that I am randomly generating all of these names. So here you saw 3 in all the device names because I generated them randomly. They came out to be a different number. I'll just run this one more time for completeness. And if I scroll up here, this time there's only 2. Anyway, that is comparison. I'm just comparing these names, and I have nested for loops going through all of this and printing them out. Now this next code, I'm not going to have time to describe exactly what it does line by line, but let me give you a high-level overview, and you can consult the long-form version of this if you want more detail. Basically, I'm going to create standard versions for all of my device vendor and operating system pairs. Once I've arbitrarily chosen standard versions, then once I've set things up, I'm going to go through every single device and look at the vendor and OS combination standard version and see if it's the same. Since we're talking about comparisons in this lesson, then this is the main thing, is I'm checking the version for the device that I'm looking at with the one that has been stored, and if it's not equal, I am printing it out. Now this next bunch of code has more to do with assignment, copying, and doing deep copying than it does with comparison, but since I'm doing comparisons in the code, that's why I put it here. This is more of an intermediate or an advanced level concept, and so if you're brand new, you're okay not understanding all of this. But this is what I want to point out, and I'm not going to go into it in a huge amount of detail. This thing that you're looking right here is assignment. In other words, what that means is that I've got this thing that I've created called devices, and when I say devices2 equals devices, this is assignment. That means that devices2 is pointing at devices. So if I make changes to devices, then it's going to be changed for devices2 as well, because they both point at the same data. That is called assignment, this equal sign. Now next, if you want to make a copy, you can use this copy functionality. You can see that it's right here, but I have a warning. Copy does not copy the entire nested data structure, which you'll learn more about next time. What it does do is it copies the first level of nesting, and so this is only going to do partial copying of the first level, and it's useful maybe in some large amounts of data context, but not in any situation I've used. If you want a complete copy of the entire data structure, that means all the lists and dictionaries and lists of lists and lists of dictionaries, etc., in a nested data structure, which you'll learn a little bit more about in the next lesson, then you need to do a deep copy, and that will copy everything, and that is what this code talks about. Okay, this next bit of code is really just because I wanted you to be able to see in action a less than and a greater than sign. So what I do is I create all my devices, then I go through every device, and for every device I assign arbitrarily an availability and a response time, and this is giving it a random value between 94 and 100 and a random number for response time between 0.5 and 1.1. And then I'm just going to compare it and see if the availability is less than the SLA. And if it is, then I print out all of this interesting stuff here. And the same thing for response time. If we look at the output, then you can see here for the ones that I ended up seeing that they were less than or greater than, depending on what it was comparing, then this is the output of this particular time. And once again, since it's all random, then this will be different every time we run it. Okay, this last thing here, I'm not going to go over it all. Basically, I'm doing a little bit of object-oriented stuff, because if you have a class, you can't use equals equals. You need to define your own function, which needs to be underscore underscore eq underscore underscore, and of course the same thing for lt less than, gt greater than, etc. And then once you've defined it, then you can begin to use it. That's what this does. It's a lot of code. I can't believe that I wrote all this for something as simple as comparisons at the beginning part of the Python class. But if you want more information, like I said, go ahead to the long form version of this. Okay, just to wrap up really quickly, what we did was comparisons. First, we created a bunch of devices using create devices. Then we alternated between not equals and equals Cisco, and we filtered those out and printed the other things. Then we did string comparison by device names, because my random device name generator might generate the same name, and so we did this loop inside a loop, a for loop inside a for loop. Then we did and compared standard versions, which we first had to create, and then we did the comparison of these things. The next thing we did is we touched on the idea of assignment versus copy versus deep copy, and I didn't go into a great amount of detail of that, but those are important things that you probably want to be aware of at some point in your Python life. We created devices again, and then we just wanted to do less than and equals. So here's an example of using SLA comparison with a simple greater than or equal. And then I didn't talk about this class EQ stuff, but I did mention it. And again, I referenced the long form version of this if you want more information. Hopefully that made sense. It's a pretty simple topic, but I had a lot of data in there, so my apologies. If you do have any questions, let me know, and thanks for listening.